Here's a saying that I usually dislike. Tell me if you've heard it before. Truth is stranger than fiction. My problem with it is that most of the time the people saying it haven't read much fiction, because fiction can be pretty strange. But every now and then something happens which gives this tired old saying new life, and it makes me rethink it. This is one of those stories, the story of ANOM.
Police forces around the world have made hundreds of arrests as part of a major sting targeting organized crime networks.
Criminal bosses were tricked into using an FBI-run encrypted messaging app.
Officers were able to read millions of messages in real time describing murder plots, mass drug importation plans, and lots of other schemes.
18 months at least of capturing this criminal activity. So this is really a proud day for the good guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the $10 million studio. I'm your host, Coffeezilla, and I would submit to you that if you look today, you'll find hundreds of articles telling you about a global sting operation that led to 800 arrests, 700 premises searched, and maybe you'll even hear of Sophia Kong, the Ninja Warrior competitor, that she was even one of the arrested, with 154 grams of Walter White seized. Maybe you've heard that something called encrypted messaging was involved, but I'm going to tell you, that's just the surface of this thing. The idea of infiltrating the underworld with a fake privacy phone is said to have started over a couple of beers between the Australian police and the FBI in 2018. Kind of makes sense, right? That's where all good ideas start. See, the big news going around was that the criminal underworld had a privacy hole in the market. And the police, well, they wanted to capitalize on it. This is because one of the criminal network's main communication methods had just totally collapsed. Obviously, the underworld kind of relies on constant communication, some of it very long distance, to conspire to launder money, traffic drugs, do business, etc. So they've turned to sophisticated encryption to keep their plans secret from the cops. Now, you may have heard of a few apps like these. Apps like Signal, which are devoted to encrypted messaging. But for some criminals, that isn't enough. Nearly all phones have GPS, cameras, microphones in them, which are all liabilities. So, as a result, a small industry has opened up to help those people who want true privacy from law enforcement. Enter the privacy phone. Let's pull up the board here. These are phones purely designed for privacy. They have their GPS disabled, most of them have a lot of apps disabled, and they route messages through proxies before delivering them, so your location is sort of always unknown. And some of these phones don't even allow you to message anyone who doesn't share a privacy phone like yours, further securing your communication. Now, one of the companies that filled this need was known as Phantom Secure. Phantom Secure was a Canadian-based company that was operated by CEO Vincent Ramos. The company had it all: secure messaging. It even created a remote kill switch that could wipe the device's data remotely, which was hugely popular, in case your device got compromised by the cops. And apparently it worked, because documents show that multiple times law enforcement got a hold of these phones, they'd find them wiped. Now, as a quick caveat, if it seems like I've been insinuating here that everyone who's interested in privacy phones are criminals, that's obviously not intended and not true. There are a million reasons to want privacy, and I support encryption, but in the case of Phantom Secure, it's more specifically was kind of a drug thing, okay? Vincent Ramos literally told undercover agents he made the phone for drug trafficking. This is actually a screenshot of an undercover meeting with Vincent, seated in a couch trying to reassure drug dealers who were skeptical about the phone. He apparently told them, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? We made it, Phantom Secure. We made it specifically for this too, meaning drug trafficking. This admission gave him a one-way ticket to being arrested and eventually flipping as a state witness in exchange for the hope of a more lenient sentence, which meant that everyone who had previously used Phantom Secure were suddenly left without a privacy phone. They couldn't use the phone network anymore, and they were looking for a new device to rely on. So now we can go back to this conversation between the FBI and Australia over beers. They knew that there was this gap in the market. The loss of Phantom Secure had been huge for criminals, and a plan emerged to capitalize on this. They decided that they would create their own privacy phone, and they would sell it to criminals and track the messages. Now, this scheme isn't anything new. It's actually something called a honeypot, and it's common within sting operations. Law enforcement will use some kind of a device to bring in criminals and then catch them, right? This is famously bait car, was a car that could be remotely turned off by the police. It was attracted, criminals who stole cars, and then they would catch them and lock them up. But in this case, the honeypot is a secure phone called the ANOM phone. The ANOM phone company built itself like a privacy phone, like Phantom Secure. It looked like a phone, acted like a phone, but it couldn't do most things. It wasn't like other phones, obviously. Instead, to use it, you had to go to the calculator app installed on the phone and type in a special code which lets you in the app. Now, at this point, and maybe I'm crazy, I think the criminal should have gotten suspicious, but maybe that's just hindsight talking, right? This was a well-designed app. It looks good, as you can see. It was even designed by a drug dealer who had flipped to work for the FBI. And the way this app worked was that every message would be secretly sent to the police alongside the receiver so that the cops could basically watch criminals talk to each other without them knowing. And slowly, they distributed these phones through a network of criminals, some of which who used to operate and sell the Phantom Secure network. And each time a new criminal got it, that would then serve as later connections to sell their people on it. Over the course of 3 years, 12,000 devices had eventually been sold to 300 criminal syndicates, which is insane. And basically, the cops had created their own little thriving phone business. And that's actually one of the hilarious parts of this whole story, is that the cops are selling phones like a phone company to criminals and selling even subscription services. Like, you literally had to pay a monthly fee for this. And the phone itself wasn't cheap either. It was $2,500 a piece. All of this is going back to the police, which is kind of hilarious when you think about it. Like, you're paying the people who are about to arrest you. And it allowed the cops unprecedented access into the underworld. And ANOM, of course, was a huge hit not only with the cops, but also with users. Soon, the messages began to roll in. Messages like this. Think he got it? You're dreaming. You reckon? What did he offer it to you for? The guy responds with a bunch of what appears to be cocaine with Batman on it. Now, there are tons of other messages like this, but most of them have the grammar of a 5-year-old, and also they're pretty repetitive. They're all sort of talking about drugs or violence of some kind. I'll sort of save you some of the low-res text messages real quick and get to the point. The cops start busting these guys' drug shipments left and right. For example, one of the cocaine shipments they busted was found among pineapples who had been cored out to put the cocaine in. In another bust, they found 3,000 pounds of cocaine hidden in a shipment of tuna cans, of all things. I can only imagine how confusing it must have been for the criminals at this point to be planning these things in secret with these secure phones, and suddenly the cops are just showing up, knowing everywhere you are, and you're calling your buddy like, did you hide it in the pineapples though? 800 arrests, 2 tons of meth, 8 tons of cocaine, 22 tons of marijuana, 250 firearms, $48 million, and 6 tons of chemicals that are used to make other drugs and stuff. Law enforcement also says they thwarted something like 100 murder plots, which is completely insane and shows just how productive this sting operation was. The only thing that sucks is that the fact that you and I know about this means that the criminals know about it too. It's an open secret, and criminals will be much more careful using privacy phones now. But there's one last funny wrinkle I need to tell you about. If it seems sort of unbelievable that none of the criminals suspected anything, actually someone did. An anonymous blogger released a post called ANOM Encrypted Scam Exposed. The blogger's name was Can You Guess 67, and on March 29th, he wrote this article detailing how ANOM is actually not a secure phone at all. And he compares it to Cypher, which is another privacy phone company, and showed how ANOM is unsecure, it links to various Google servers, and it's easy to pull IP information, which obviously you don't want out there. And this all happened at a completely critical moment for this sting, because the big sting hadn't happened yet. It was a lot of, data collection, watching, letting the phones sort of proliferate around the underworld. According to the U.S. attorney, only in the last 48 hours of the investigation did the plan get most of its results. 500 of the 800 arrests came in the last 48 hours of the giant sting. And this one post called it out 3 months beforehand. But here's the insane thing. And again, this is where this story is hard to believe. This guy, Can You Guess 67, he didn't get it all right. He, of course, pointed out that the phones were unsecure and went through like Amazon servers, Google servers, but he had no idea why. And in possibly the most hilarious twist of irony of all time, he finishes the blog post by saying that he reported ANOM to law enforcement. Needless to say, shortly after he reported this, the post was deleted and the plan stayed safe. 3 months later, of course, the massive sting went down, and I believe it's going to go down as one of the most legendary moments of police intelligence work in decades. But it was almost unraveled by a guy who thought he was simply exposing a scam. The story of ANOM is a fascinating look into the lives not only of the criminal underworld, but also our intelligence agencies, who seemingly will go to any length to get by encryption services and get into this underworld where they can find and catch criminals. This operation not only hurt organized crime, what I love about it is that I believe it serves as a reminder that sometimes the cops aren't as blind as people want to believe. Sometimes they're a step ahead, listening in on your conversations.
I know what you mean, this ain't what it seemed. Nothing but a trick, trying to sell me on a dream, but that was where you lost me. Wake up and smell the coffee.